have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And this week we are honored to have as our guest the New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn, who will speak to us about being an out lesbian and a powerful post, her future political plans, the threats to the separation of church and state, and much, much more.
And who's going to win the NBA final? No. There are new leaders suddenly at the Human Rights Campaign, the Gill Foundation, and momentarily at New York's Empire State Pride agenda. Quite a fast turnover.
Tennessee high school principal is fired after telling some students that they're going to hell for being gay. And a gay male student in Virginia is suspended for wearing high heels.
Wait till you see that report. A Maryland woman was denied communion by a priest at her mother's funeral because she's a lesbian, and the archdiocese ended up apologizing, but man, that was an ugly incident.
An LGBT rights bill has lost in Springfield, Ohio.
The U.S. Senate, as you know, has lost one of its last moderate Republicans, and the Idaho Senate is losing its only out lesbian.
She's tired of it. This is a really horrible story that we just heard this week. At least 40 Iraqi gays are hunted down, tortured, and murdered by the Mujahideen, and the government does nothing.
Well, of course. And an update, ACT UP New York has scheduled its 25th anniversary demonstration for April 25th, mark your calendars, in the downtown financial district here to push for the financial speculation tax, a few cents on every Wall Street transaction to support global health.
So actually change your calendars. I already marked mine for March 28th. It's now April 25th.
Never mind. April 25th.
And two out gay Tony-winning actors, Dennis O'Hare and Stephen Spinella, are alternating a modern monologue on the Iliad at the New York Theater Workshop. But we turn now to our guest. Christine Quinn, welcome.
Thank you.
You've been a housing advocate. You were the head of the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project, a city council member representing us here in Chelsea. I had that still. But were elected about 7 years ago, Speaker of the City Council of New York, and considered a leading candidate for mayor in 2012. When will you be announcing? 2013, next year. When will you be announcing your plans?
You know, obviously, it's something I'm looking at. I think we all should probably get through the presidential election, deal with the big issues in Congress and the Senate, and then in 2013, it's a good time, or you know, for those of us who are interested in 2013, to make things final.
Okay.
We have to ask.
Yes, exactly.
And in the same vein, we have to ask about your wedding plans.
Yes.
Because that's also been talked about.
Yes.
Do you have a schedule for that?
It's going to be in the spring. We haven't announced the date yet. We're probably going to do it this spring. Spring of 2012. It's funny, Chris Smith in New York Magazine recently wrote this story about, like, the political calculations of when to do it. Which is like, the big calculation is like making the list, which cousin is invited, which cousin isn't. So it's going to be spring of 2012.
Well, there may be a little political calculation in this because you are a Catholic, raised a Catholic.
Yes.
You have maintained
so is Kim.
Good relations with the new cardinal. But I doubt he'll be performing the wedding ceremony.
I would think not. I would think not. We will have somebody, a civil judge or a civil person. So, well, not that he's not civil, but you know what I'm saying. Perform the service.
Now, talk about your experiences. We had you on right after you were elected Speaker of the Council. Right. An extremely exciting moment for a lot of people because it's such a visible role. It's really the second most powerful post in New York City. What has been your experience as an out lesbian in that role? Do you ever still experience any pushback from people that surprises you?
Not a lot. You know, in the first couple of years, a little bit. We had some moments, you know, where people were coming to me with legislation that was not really inclusive of domestic partners. So now we have marriage, but, you know, in 2006, 2007, still that issue of does it say wife/domestic partner was an issue, and there was a little bit of an education process where I had to say to some people, don't bring me a bill, don't bring me a home rule from Albany that leaves me out of it. Even if it's all you can get passed, no. And I actually think that was a really, although they may not have been pleasant meetings, I think they were a really good process for the people that were involved in them, because I think from their perspective, that's what the bill they could get passed in Albany was, which mattered to them. To me, it was like, I'm not going to put my stamp of approval on something that affirmatively leaves me out. And I don't think it was homophobic. I think they were trying to get their job done. They didn't see it. And some of those folks, some in the labor union, have become really strong supporters and really were around marriage. So that's the good part. You know, occasionally there's things where people are just nasty or just homophobic, but it happens infrequently. And whenever it happens, you have so many other people at a public meeting or something who are so great. It's really like it's hard to actually even remember.
And I hear you about the learning curve for things like legislation, and I assume the people you're talking about are more fringe types.
No, they were kind of not so fringe labor unions.
Well, I guess my question is, I'm trying to, as we look at the Rush Limbaugh controversy, right, the contraception controversy, the various denominations across the country beginning to really punch hard at this idea of religious organizations being the victims of
right,
prejudice and discrimination. You, as a leader of the city, have to deal with everybody on a daily basis all over the city. And whether it is the cardinal or Orthodox Jewish right, leaders or other religious leaders or others who have political, overtly stated positions that are homophobic, you know, does that, are you able to ignore that? Does it hit you inside?
Well,
does it come up?
It's interesting, the fact that most of the people you just mentioned have to come to me for something.
Absolutely.
So I think that's significant. They have to come to see somebody who, and you know, for each one of them at different degrees of dislike. Some maybe they're just saying it because it's part of their job. Others, I think it's really deeply held, have to come ask me for something. And you can tell in somebody's body language how uncomfortable that is. And sometimes I feel sorry for them. And sometimes I don't, depending on kind of who they are and what they've done. But I don't think that's insignificant at all.
Well,
at all.
You just took what I would call a courageous stand, because it seems to be a very misunderstood issue.
It really does, right? I know
upholding
what you're gonna say,
a long-standing city law that said, yes, space by religious groups can be rented in public schools, but not for regular worship services. We've explained this issue at length on the show. Some got in because under a court injunction, but the law has been upheld, and now it's under another injunction. But what about the separation of church and state? We also fund millions of dollars to religiously affiliated groups. How can we be secure that there is a separation still there, and that these groups that are getting all this money are not discriminating against gay people, for instance?
Well, you know, look, first on this issue of within the schools, I want to also credit Mayor Bloomberg, because he's getting the lion's share of the backlash.
And we can be hard on him on this show, but he is really standing up on this.
And the thing is, it's not, as some have tried to say, oh, a church burned down and it needed a place for a week or two. Look, you can always make exceptions, but this is, and if you look at the webpage of the lawyers that are representing the folks who want to be in schools, it's very clear. On their webpage, they say their goal is to get as many places of worship into as many schools as possible. It's a strategy they are employing.
Church planting.
Yeah.
We just said yes.
That's a dangerous thing as it relates to our public schools.
And some of them are ex-gay ministries where they're actually trying to convert gay people
in the village.
There's strategies and there's bad strategies. So, you know, you have to... The issue of separation of church and state, it's not always a clear, right line, but that is so clear to me. To have schools be places of worship just to me seems completely over the line. Now, it's not a decision that we in the council can say yes or no to. It's ultimately in the hands of the state legislature. It's interesting. There's a resolution in the council in support of allowing them. It started with about 35 sponsors. It's down to probably 31 or 30, because a lot of members really didn't realize what it was. The proponent of it, or the lead sponsor, Fernando Cabrera, has asked for a vote. I've told him, and I've said to the press, I do not support it. We're debating internally if we should have that vote on the issue. But I think it's a dangerous thing if we lose this in Albany or in the court. Now, groups we fund, because there are a lot of, Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, Catholic Charities, Agudath Israel. You have to these groups have to kind of affirm, not just in a promise, but basically almost in an affidavit, that they will take everyone, just like we did at the Anti-Violence Project. We were the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project, but we had to affirm to our government funders that we would not screen people based on sexual orientation, that we would take anyone. And in fact, we had a not insignificant number of folks in the neighborhood who weren't gay who would come in for services. So it's that you have to screen everybody. I mean, that you have to take everybody, that you have to do it in a non-denominational or non-religious way. And interestingly, there were a couple of years ago, homeless service organizations that were absolutely religious, and we had to pull back funding from those because it wasn't just their name. It was absolutely, you had to pray before you got your meal. You had to pray before bed. Now that group said, we don't want the money then. Okay,
so, and we're coming up on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day month is how we like to think of it.
Well, a lot of parades. You don't march in parades that exclude LGBT Irish groups. There's one that does, that's inclusive, that they just had out in Queens. Any hope for resolving that? Controversy and with the other parades, with especially the big one in Manhattan. You've worked very hard on it.
I think if the big one gets resolved, then all the others end up getting resolved. I think. I don't know that for sure. Yeah, I have hope. It's not going to happen this year. I do have hope that it'll happen when I'm not 100% sure. You talked to the Prime Minister of Ireland. I spoke this weekend to a woman, Kathleen Lynch. She's a minister
for equality.
Exactly. They are embarrassed by this. This is embarrassing internationally to them, because they care a lot about, the Irish diaspora. They care a lot about how Irish people are treated all across the world.
Well, you'd think it would be embarrassing to the Hibernians here, but it's not, clearly.
No, it's not. But I really do think that the days of this are coming to an end.
Okay.
There has been a perception that I just think I'd like you to address because it's out there, which is that you have moved in the career we've talked about from a very progressive approach to a more centrist stance as you take on more power in the city and as you contemplate a run for mayor. What's your perception?
I don't see it that way. I mean, certainly as you go from being a local council member to being chair of the health committee, which I was before speaker, then to speaker, the array of issues you're working on broadens, right? So when I was health committee chair, I spent a lot of time working on Staten Island, where they don't have a lot of hospitals. As speaker, I work on a broader array of issues than I did as a council member just to the local needs of my district. Maybe those issues are issues that people are not as used to seeing me working on, small business issues or tax fairness issues or issues of something we did a couple years ago around creating fairness and the compliance in the business tax code, which was not progressive nor not progressive. It was a way to generate more money without raising taxes and kind of closing loopholes. So I think it may be that. Look, I'm very proud of my record as a progressive. I'm very proud that in my time as city council, I think we've passed, we've passed more pro-tenant legislation than any city council in history, and we're going to do more of it. 2 years or so ago with Councilmember Jessica Lappin, we passed a law around crisis pregnancy centers in New York City. We're right now being sued by Right to Life organizations in our effort to sustain that law, and if you're in other parts of the country, check if you have crisis pregnancy centers. They pretend they're full-service reproductive centers. They open up right next to Planned Parenthoods, and they're not. They pretend to be doctors' offices. They're not. Our law says, say what you are. It's a truth in advertising piece of legislation, and I think a really good one. I'm also very proud that at first over the mayor's objections, but then we were able to convince him to change his mind, we passed legislation, the most aggressive legislation in the country, around limiting federal Immigration Services' ability to go onto Rikers Island, our prison, and put detainers on people before they've ever been convicted of a violent crime. That's a very progressive piece of pro-immigrant legislation that I'm, very proud of. But as a citywide elected, which you kind of become when you're the speaker, you have a broad agenda also.
So what's left on the LGBT agenda in the city council? Most of the laws have kind of been passed. We were thinking of one. Some cities actually compensate their employees who are on domestic partnerships or same-sex marriages with kind of a supplemental thing because they have to pay extra taxes on their things. Is that
we had a tax credit. We have a tax credit bill because even if the city of New York, it's crazy, wants to do a city tax credit, Albany has to approve that. So we have a request for a city tax credit to do that in Albany, which is the way we were looking at it. We hadn't looked at that. We could certainly look at that. Some of the big issues in the city for LGBT, I think, are around funding. So runaway and homeless youth funding, which isn't all LGBT, but is huge. That's a big, big issue for us. We're unfortunately looking at a lot of structural and potentially funding issues in our HIV/AIDS Service Administration that I'm very concerned about. The staff at the council is doing a series of meetings right now, may end up in a major oversight hearing in the spring if the meetings don't address some of our concerns. So that's really an area. And I'm a little nervous that we seem to be headed. I don't know this, but there's signs that indicate we could be headed to some type of work requirement, which I'd be really concerned about. I'm also concerned about some of the new requirements that have drug testing to get you to maintain your housing. So that whole area is an area I'm really concerned about. I think there's a lot more we could be doing around women's health issues in New York City that are funded by the government to be more inclusive of lesbians and bisexual women. That's another area I'd want to look at. I don't know how many laws there are still, though I'm open to any ideas.
Well, one thing we wanted to ask you about was California now has a statewide law about mandating inclusion of LGBT history in curricula. Is that something you might find appealing?
We have Respect for All, which is an anti-bullying program, but what about inclusion?
Yeah, that would have to be done by the state legislature too, because those kind of things didn't get transferred, unfortunately, to the council. Though we could get the DOE to do it.
Right, the mayor controls the schools.
Yeah. No, and that's absolutely something we should look at. Not exactly the same at all, but we're also working right now and with a lot of the women's groups out there on trying to get the real health ed and sex ed requirements from the state actually implemented, something the mayor's done well on but gotten a lot of grief on. But that's something we should look at and how we can, because it was interesting, I was at an event last week with some young people in Brooklyn, and one of the young women was telling me she did her history paper on the Stonewall riots, and nobody else in her class knew what that was. And it's an important part, not just of our history, but a particularly important part of New York City's history. So it's something we should look at either with the state and or with the Department of Ed.
Now, you've also passed recently a big, what you call an open data bill,
yes,
so that we can see what's going on in the city. What about, now this is something California does, a suggestion, if you get government funds out there, you've got to have open board meetings that people can see. Even we've run into that with our own community center trying to find out what they're doing.
Laws.
Yeah, we should look at that. That's an interesting thing that we could look at in some of our funding requirements. I hadn't heard that, but we could look at that.
And quickly, because we know your time is limited, you do have a proud history, including as a demonstrator. We've been arrested together at the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
I'd often turn to Anne for advice because I hated getting arrested. Anne was much more zen about it, was her advice.
Bring a peanut butter sandwich and something to read. That's all you need.
That's right.
And get arrested with your friends. But arrests have gotten more brutal in this city, more frequent, we would say more illogical. And some of that is about these rules of how many people can walk down a sidewalk that were passed by the council.
They were actually passed by the police department.
Supported, I think. Well, whatever.
Whatever.
My point is, can we revisit this? Can we tell the, ACT UP is planning its 25th anniversary demo with Occupy Wall Street for our April 25th. Okay. Yeah. But everybody's very concerned about the fact that the police in this city, in many ways, whether it's stop and frisk or demonstrators or whatever, seem to operate outside the parameters of the law.
Well, let me say a couple things. One, I think one of the most important reforms we need to put in place that'll give us a better kind of infrastructure of control over police misbehavior is we need to add into the Civilian Complaint Review Board's power prosecutorial authority. Because right now, basically, they make a recommendation to the police commissioner. We recently looked at about 104 recommendations of discipline around stop, question, and frisk that went to the CCRB. 96 of those were reduced by the police commissioner. We need to give the prosecutorial authority to the CCRB. I think that would compel more New Yorkers who've had an incident to actually go there. We would need to also fund them at a level that they could actually hire those lawyers. But I think that would make a big difference in all of the areas that you're talking about. You know, the police rules that Ann referenced from back, I think, like 2006 or 2007, there were a series of court rulings that kind of threw out what the structure had been. And the police department created a set of rules for you have X number of people, you need a permit. I think you need to have a number at which you have a permit. And look, I've demonstrated with a permit.
We could argue
and
about that.
No, right. And I've demonstrated with a permit, without a permit. And, you know, but I think you do need a number at which you have a permit. Could the number be higher? Should it be less? No. Could it be higher? That's always something we can look at. And I don't think there's anything. I think it's always good once you put something in place to go back and say, how can you make it better? You know, interestingly, as we move forward with the ACT UP event, or, you know, even I assume there'll be more Occupy Wall Street stuff as the weather gets better, people should really feel free to call their council members' offices if they've had, you know, any problems at all, because we don't want people to have problems, but we certainly don't want them to have problems and then not feel like there's anywhere to go, because unfortunately some people feel they can't go to the CCRB.
And we're not looking for chaos,
no,
but
right.
It would be nice if there were some preemptive message to the police that says, you know, cool it with the paranoia.
Well, that's what I mean,
one
of
the
things, I'm sorry to interrupt, is the degree to which people want to talk to the police in advance of an event. I think I'm not speaking for the police department, but I believe there would be an openness to that in advance. Now, not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone wants to say...
I want the mayor to talk to the police, or you to talk to the police and say, look, freedom of assembly, these people are not out to take down the city.
I'm more than happy around now I can't remember if it's March or April, but the ACT UP event, to say to the police department, the leaders of the event want to sit down with the police department and discuss how the event's going to happen. That often happens. Well, that's right.
And there is a
there's a bit of a rub there, so we'll have to keep talking.
And there is a bill in the city council by your sister in the LGBT caucus, Rosie Mendez, a First Amendment facilitation bill.
I don't know.
Well, take a look.
All right.
Because it's about structuring the conversation with the police, or whatever. When they have to have deadlines about permits and all that other kind of stuff.
Ann doesn't want a deadline.
I repeat, I'm not looking for chaos.
Right.
I'm not looking for anybody to be hurt. I'm for peacefulness. But I would like a presumption of innocence for demonstrators.
I think that the couple of things you just said are right. There should be a presumption of innocence for demonstrators. And you certainly shouldn't have things like we had just one particularly egregious example where, you know, Councilmember Rodriguez goes down to be an observer, you know, and gets arrested. I mean, that was clearly outrageous. So you're absolutely right. There should be a presumption of innocence. There shouldn't be chaos. Sometimes to help avoid the chaos, it is good to have those conversations in advance, which I'm not saying anybody has to do, but it's something worth considering. And I'm not familiar with Rosie's bill, but we can certainly go take a look at it. But that part of that is about that conversation.
Any other messages for our viewers before we invited you? But
you know, if you're watching this TV show, there's a good chance you're LGBT.
Oh, we have a big straight audience.
All right. Yeah. But if you're watching and you're LGBT and you're not out, there is nothing more important you can do. You don't have to go to it's great to go to a demonstration. It's great to do all this other stuff, but that's the most political and most important thing you can do. Trust me.
Hear, hear.
Well said. To be continued.
Absolutely. I've got some homework after this.
And we'll be back with the news in just a second.
Now we're going to look at what's happening with leadership in the rest of the country in our LGBT group. So much news to report. The Human Rights Campaign has had Joe Salmonese as their leader for many, many years.
7, I think.
And now they have turned, I think he takes charge in June, with Chad Griffin, who is the guy who runs the American Foundation for Equal Rights, the thing that brought the Prop 8 case in California, much to the consternation of mainstream LGBT groups.
With whom he is friendlier these days. Chad Griffin, 38 years old, has been, I was a little surprised at his youth.
Well, to us.
Very successful political consultant and PR executive with his own firm in LA. Interestingly, he got his start, he came out of Arkansas. He worked on the Bill Clinton campaign 20 years ago and worked in the Clinton White House under Dee Dee Myers in the communications office.
And they're thinking he's going to be a lot edgier because he did something like produce the film Outrage, which exposed closeted, anti-gay officials.
And he, in conceiving AFER and going after Prop 8 in the courts, that was an extremely bold and radical move that was opposed by all the mainstream LGBT legal groups, Lambda Legal Defense, the ACLU, Lesbian and Gay Rights Project, the National Center for Lesbian Rights.
So he's an outsider like Mitt Romney. He's a Washington outsider.
Yeah, that's why he had, there's a play that's been done starring George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and everyone else. Look, I'm of two minds about this.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I think he does seem to be an iconoclast who is not tied to old ways of thinking and who is extremely ambitious and aggressive, and I love that, someone who really has an agenda and wants to accomplish it. On the other hand, he's someone who talks about having had his eyes opened by a Prop 8 demonstration he happened upon after it was passed in 2008.
Well,
4 years ago, he discovers demonstrations.
And
he was 34 years old.
And we're still active, but we can be a little tired sometimes. Sometimes the zeal of the converted can be, something to capitalize
I'm
on.
all for that energy. I'm all for that ambition. I just have my fingers crossed a little that it will be put to good ends, but certainly an improvement over what has been perceived about the Human Rights Campaign in recent years, which was that they were too collaborative with the administrations. Now, one interesting question is, here's someone who brought Ted Olson into this case, who has
on the golf course or something.
Has Ken Mehlman on his board of directors at AFER, has raised money from a lot of right-wing Republicans. HRC has endorsed Obama. Is that a problem?
Well, Ken Mehlman is sorry that he supported the amendment against same-sex marriage now. He announced that this week. I don't accept your apology, Ken, because you're still giving all your money to right-wing Republicans who support it. Sorrow, to me, means I've changed my ways.
Exactly, and I'm not giving money. I'm not co-hosting fundraisers for John Boehner.
Right.
Which he is still doing.
Well, let's move on to the Tim Gill Foundation.
Well, let me just say before we leave Chad Griffin, I should quote him. I'll approach our work with a great sense of urgency because there are real life consequences to inaction. And this is the grandest, most exciting opportunity of my life. He talks about doing this for the kids and keeping in the forefront of his mind kids all across the nation who are still isolated and afraid.
That's great. And I don't think it's so bad that he's 38. I was already a has-been by the time I was 38. I'm 58 now.
No, I'm just a little surprised that someone who is as prominent and accomplished as he is only 38.
Well, now we'll go to the Gill Foundation. This is Tim Gill, who's a big rich guy who funds a lot of gay stuff all across the country. He has a Gill Action Fund, and they have chosen as their new director another Republican, Kirk Fordham. And he's a registered Republican. He used to work with Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma.
And Mel Martinez and Mark Foley.
Ann's friend.
Yes.
Who was the gay guy who had the thing with the page.
He was also on the Victory Fund board, but this is...
He's 44. Is that old enough?
Too old. Too Republican. But we'll see. We'll see. The Gill Action Fund has gone the other way. And we're all very interested because this morning, as we got ready to tape this show, the Empire State Pride Agenda announced that they had fired Ross Levy, their executive director, for the last couple of years.
I think Levi. but anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, Levi is how you spell his name, and he's been there for 12 years. He's been 2 years as executive director, and you know, the line seems to be that, well, he wasn't visible enough in this collaborative effort that they used to pass the marriage thing, where everybody was supposed to sublimate their own egos and work together.
Well, the irony was,
what's the problem?
The irony was that when Alan Van Capelle left the Pride agenda, it looked like Brian Elner was going to get hired to run the Pride agenda, and everyone said, oh, no, you can't hire him. He's too right-wing. He's too in bed with Bloomberg.
Right.
And then they gave the job to Ross, who'd been at ESPA for a long time and was very experienced in Albany. Brian went off and got himself a job with HRC, and everybody thought, oh, that's just a nothing thing. And then he's all visible passing marriage equality in New York because Governor Cuomo was very friendly with them and with HRC.
Brian has moved to the private sector.
Well, now Ross is being perceived as not having been as visible as Brian Elner and not raising enough money. That may
they got the job done.
They all did, and it was a collaborative effort. And there's some question about ESPA's agenda at this point.
Well, let's go to some even younger people who are making news around the country, including Asante Cotman, who was a student in Charles City High School down there in Virginia. Let's roll that tape if we can.
New at 6, a 17-year-old Charles City County student says he was kicked out of school for being gay and wearing high heels.
The principal isn't talking, but the superintendent is investigating. Diane Walker went to the high school and has details in tonight's 12 on Your Side. Diane?
Ryan, the student was ordered to take off the high heels because he was disrupting the school. Asante Codman challenged his principal and got suspended. I talked with him on day 1 of his 3-day suspension.
I wore this jacket right here and a white shirt and my scarf and a pair of cargo pants and heels. And I didn't see it ever bother anyone.
Beige stilettos ignited animosity between the high school junior and his principal. Asante Cotman says he's the only openly gay male student at Charles City High. The spike heels were the crescendo, the boiling point for both.
She's talking to me in a matter like belittling me, telling me like, oh, you shouldn't come back here. Oh, we would be glad if you didn't come back here. Everybody would be happy. That comment really got to me. I was almost done.
What do you mean almost done?
I feel like I was about to kill myself.
Asante refused to take off the heels, and the principal called him out of every class.
And she said I was being disrespectful because she told me to take them off, and I didn't take them off or whatever. I don't understand disrupting the class because nobody was really talking about them. Everybody was doing their work. People had seen me wear heels before. People seen me with a pocketbook every day.
He put on slippers when the principal threatened to call police. Principal Stephanie Crutchfield wouldn't discuss it. She says she couldn't. I walked to the adjacent school and found the superintendent, Dr. Crawley.
I want Asante to know that we want him to be comfortable. We want him to enjoy his school environment, and that we're going to look out for his rights just like we look out for the rights of any child.
Are those heels violating the handbook?
I cannot honestly tell you what it says about the heels. We do have certain rules about the type of shoes that you wear, especially if it's something that's going to cause you to injure yourself.
Asante says female students wear high heels, and the slippers they demanded he wear violate the student dress code because of the open heel. He believes he's being punished for his sexual orientation.
They suspended me for being gay. I'm missing a lot of classes. I'm missing classes that I need to graduate.
School officials met with Asante and his mom and asked them to stop the story. But he believes the principal went too far and says nothing has been offered to end his suspension or to get him his schoolwork. Asante is scheduled to return to school on Monday. Diane Walker, NBC 12.
Brave kid.
A smart kid. And looks very cute in those heels. I'm not a heels wearer myself.
No, nor I.
Not so smart is Dorothy Bond, the former principal of Haywood High School in Brownsville, Tennessee. She allowed us how gay people are not on God's path and are ruining their lives.
And if you're pregnant.
Oh, that's no good.
But not if you're
either.
gay and pregnant.
So she was suspending kids and expelling them for public affection. She was mandating school prayers She has now resigned her position.
It was a piece of work, but she was getting away with it for a long time.
Yeah. In California, where we're slowly implementing SB 48, the law to mandate inclusion of LGBT history in school curricula, the right wing there has been cleared to start gathering signatures for a referendum to repeal the law. We'll keep you up to date on that.
Yeah. And in Minnesota, the Justice Department, got involved with the Anoka Hennepin School District, which has a history of not dealing well with gay students, many of whom have committed suicide. 4
suicides. This is Michelle Bachmann's Minnesota district.
Under the terms of this settlement, the school district is going to pay $270,000 to students who complained about this, and not each.
Again, very brave students who stood up and fought the school district and demanded.
And the school is going to be under essentially a receiver, a monitoring for 5 years by the Justice Department. So that's all good about how they're going to deal with LGBT issues.
There was constant ongoing harassment and bullying. The schools did absolutely nothing about it, ignored it. Parents
They're neutral on it.
Yes.
They were neutral on it.
Yeah, so this is considered an extremely important settlement.
Something that you're not going to get from the Romney Justice Department, certainly, or the Santorum Justice Department.
No.
Think about that, folks.
And this is a settlement of a suit that the Justice Department and the Department of Education federally were bringing against the school district. So the fact that they were willing to do that is a great precedent. Now, another story of a teen in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who was at a party or at a house where there was a party.
18-year-old Cody Rogers.
Targeted and badly beaten, and he has now become an activist for hate crimes laws, which Oklahoma does not have. Let's look at his story.
I believe that it would not have happened if there was not gay people in that apartment.
A Tulsa teen says he was beat up because he's gay.
Yeah, this picture of him after the attack has been shared dozens of times on Facebook. That teen is determined to create something positive from an assault that, as you see, left him bruised and battered.
Absolutely. Fox 23's Adam Palooka is live outside of the Dennis R. Neal Equality Center with more tonight. Adam, what happened?
Well, Cher, it's something the folks here at the Equality Center say they fight every day, homophobia. But not every case of homophobia turns violent. But this one will leave lasting marks on a local 18-year-old.
My cheek, right here, my forehead's obviously a little bruised up. The busted lip, my eye is a little, I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, it's hard to look at, especially in the mirror.
Close to 72 hours after he was attacked at a weekend party in South Tulsa.
I'm feeling really emotional. I'm holding it in right now.
Cody Rogers is slowly starting to heal.
There's some ladies that were invited. Their boyfriends came over. They had a problem with the homosexuals that were there.
Cody could hear the slurs from another room.
Things like where the where the homos.
When those boyfriends were asked to leave the apartment, one refused, attacking Cody's friend, a 21-year-old girl.
I stepped in and got them off of her, and at that point they threw me to the ground. Obviously, I'm a little beat up.
As he was on the ground, the two teens attacking him kept shouting the slurs. His friends shocked to see it all unfold.
They were just so angry just over someone's sexual orientation that they would do this kind of thing. He looked like as if a truck hit him.
Cody lost consciousness, and when he came to, the attackers were gone. The police came minutes later.
It's classified as a simple assault.
I believe 100% that this was a hate crime.
But sexual orientation is not a protected class in Oklahoma. Cody is using pictures of his battered body to try and push for change.
I'm not ashamed as to what happened. I'm proud to stand here and show the bruises.
He's already started a Facebook page to change Oklahoma's hate crime laws. He thinks this could be where the real healing begins. I asked Cody if he was surprised that this attack happened in Tulsa. He told me he was. He says he came out about 18 months ago, and so far it had all been positive until last weekend. Now, to check out Cody's Facebook page, just go to this story on Fox23.com. You'll find a link there. Reporting live downtown, Adam Palooka, Fox 23 News.
Adam, thank you very much. In New at 10, Adam tells us why officers with TPD say their hands are essentially tied when it comes to cases like this, and what the Equality Center says it is doing to help change state laws.
this is what Chad Griffin is talking about. You know, we need these poor kids who are subject to this. This is why we need the education that California is doing.
And we need to stand up for them, the adults in those situations, in the schools and everything else, and speak out for them.
Exactly. And we have to stop this at the source, and that is really early education on these things. But then, one more good case, bisexual freshman Hillary Dworkowski at New York University is leading a big protest against Chick-fil-A. The only New York City outlet for Chick-fil-A is on the NYU campus. How'd that happen? And she's offended by their donations to right-wing anti-gay
And NYU
causes.
is saying they're not going to get into that.
Well, the Student Senate said, you know, they have good food. And they do good works in other ways. Really? All right. I want to get to another case of bullying, which is this, the priest in Maryland.
Well.
Gaithersburg, Maryland. A woman's mother dies.
Barbara Johnson, and they're getting ready for the funeral service, and the priest says, oh, I'm sorry, who are you? And she says, I'm Barbara's partner. That's it. So apparently the priest even said something to them there.
Yes.
But then when Barbara, at her mother's funeral, goes up to receive communion, the priest puts his hand over the cup and just stands there and says, "You're living in sin." Says this to her, and she stands there for several minutes, and he says no. He's a big right-wing anti-abortion activist. He takes his religion seriously.
He also left the altar.
While she was speaking, eulogizing her mother, he leaves the altar, and then he says, "I'm not feeling well. Somebody else is going to have to do the graveside service, if anyone."
No new priest did he assign.
They found somebody.
Well,
and they found somebody to give Barbara communion.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is ridiculous. Well, interesting thing is, it actually is church policy not to get into scenes like this at funerals. How about that? Even though they have a very strict law against homosexuality.
Well, it does raise the question of hypocrisy, just a little bit. And you've always said, I want these people to go ahead and practice their religion and not get a...
When I was still a Catholic and I was a kid, the priest of the local parish knew I was gay. Because I told him, and I said, I'm not confessing that as a sin.
All right.
I have other sins. Yes, I do. But I said, I'm not confessing that. So I would work on the altar with him when I was like 20, you know, and he'd come to me at communion and say, "Are you in a state of grace?" I said, "Give me that communion," you know, and he would. Even Cardinal O'Connor from our day in New York would not deny communion to anyone. He says, you can't judge somebody's state of their soul.
I thought they did that every day. Evidently not.
You don't know.
The Episcopal Bishop of Alaska, on the other hand, the Episcopal Bishop has endorsed the Anchorage Equal Rights Initiative, which would add sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression to the human rights law of Anchorage. So thank you to that religious leader.
Oh, and we have a horrible Cardinal of New York, Dolan, who said this week, "I don't recall a right to marriage," describing marriage as a call. A call.
Well, this is their new thing, you know, because the courts are saying, the Supreme Court has like 16 decisions over the years that define marriage as a right, and therefore they, you know, it kicks in equal protection laws. And so they're trying to take that away. And
sounding very much like Patricia Heaton, he says, "Oh, now there's a right to sterilization, abortion, chemical contraceptives."
She apologized.
Yeah. And too late. And then he says, "Suppose you need you might want to visit a prostitute. You need that help."
Oh my God!
This is the Cardinal of New York. They're all feeling their oats these days.
Yeah, they are.
You need to back them up. You stay in your corner, we'll stay in our corner.
And we heard a case similar to this in the South, but now in St. Louis, a Catholic teacher and music director has been fired for planning to marry his partner of 20 years. Everyone in the parish knew he had a partner, but when they wanted to legalize it...
You got to stay in the closet about that stuff. You got to work for those institutions. It's a sad thing. Terrible news in New York, where right in our neighborhood, a block away, John Law while back. 57 was bound, gagged, murdered by somebody that he hired from rentboy.com, they assume, and the guy was seen using his credit card, or not credit card, but bank card, trying to use it at a local bank.
Well, the apartment was ransacked.
Yeah, so if you have any information about that, avp.org would be the place to go.
Yeah, and what do we think? The St. Patrick's Parade on Staten Island excluded gay people?
No, the gay group decided not even to push to get into the thing anymore. Come on, listen, we need a little tenacity out there, you know, so that you're still pushing and we're still boycotting.
Yeah.
We told you about Sheriff Babu in Arizona, and how his sister said that he was having an affair with a 17-year-old kid at the school where he taught, and now he's saying that his sister is nuts and they took her kids away and all this kind of stuff. It is quite ugly out there. I haven't seen the latest polls, though.
Ugly in Jackson, Mississippi, where the cops barred an LGBT rights march on the grounds that they had no insurance.
Ugly in Springfield, Ohio, which voted 3-2 against adding sexual orientation and gender identity to their human rights ordinance.
Ugly in the United States Congress, which overwhelmingly passed a bill to declare demonstrations on federal property or at a big event like a political convention to be a federal crime.
And we won't have Olympia Snowe there, one of the last moderate Republicans there to protect us. She has suddenly resigned, and they're scrambling there to see who's going to succeed her in Maine. We just saw that Angus King, an independent former governor, is going to get in, which could, there was a really good Democrat who was thinking of running.
Well, Angus has a good LGBT record, doesn't he?
Yeah, but everybody was looking at Chellie Pingree as the Democratic candidate. Yeah.
And we're losing Idaho State Senator Nicole Lefevre, who has decided she's had enough of the right-wing Idaho legislature, which would not even allow to be considered a non-discrimination ordinance because it would be a step toward legalizing same-sex marriage. So she said after about 8 years in the legislature, that's it, I've had enough.
But we may get Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. She leads all opponents there, including Tommy Thompson, although by 1 point.
A little bit.
The former governor. But you know, that's encouraging at this point.
For the U.S. Senate, this is.
And Joe Nocera wrote a column in the Times saying he's rooting for Santorum to get the nomination because that would really tell the Republicans when he loses that they're losing, they're running a losing hand.
Makes me very, very nervous. As someone else pointed out,
he could win.
He could. We thought Ronald Reagan was a sure
Robert Reich
loser.
pointed that out.
Yeah. Andrew Breitbart, do we have anything to say about him?
He was a member of the guy who died at 43. He looked about 73, if you saw him on television. I mean, he was a
You were
wreck.
going to say 63.
I was, but I thought Ann's 63, and she looks great. Looks a lot better than I do. Well, Ann, you could be going to the new Sage Center.
Anyway, he was on the Go Proud board. Then he resigned over, I can't remember what, but he was a racist conservative.
Horrible.
And now conspiracy theorists say Obama killed him.
So he couldn't have gone to the Sage Center, but you could. And,
yes, I could.
And I could too. And they're running. It's a five day a week at 7th Avenue and 27th Street there in New York.
$2 dinners.
$2 dinners if you're over 60 years old. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm getting there.
And if you want to do a little historical exploration or write some history, you can go to the new website, wikiqueer.org. This is an add-on to Wikipedia. This is the LGBT version, wikiqueer.org, W-I-K-I queer.org. Check it out.
Couple of marriage notes.
Sure.
Somebody out there has filed, the Freedom to Marry Coalition has filed some signatures to try to get on the ballot another constitutional amendment to change the old one, which bans same-sex marriage, so that they can.
In Ohio.
In Ohio.
You left out where?
Oh, all right. It's Ohio, the state of Ohio, where they voted in 2004 overwhelmingly to ban it.
People think this is a long shot at best. There's a question of whether it would go on the ballot this year or next. Everybody's rooting for next year, so it doesn't bring out the right-wingers to vote against Obama in a state that is very much a toss-up and very important.
And as Ann Northrop often says, these polls are crazy because in New Jersey, people said in a poll, 57 to 37% they support same-sex marriage. But then when they said, do you support the fact that Governor Christie vetoed the bill that passed it? 48 to 47% said, yes, we do. And we're glad he vetoed that,
They're
even though we support same-sex marriage.
They're very positive in New Jersey.
It's like, that's nuts. If you want it, you have to want him not to veto it.
Oh, and talk about crazy. The Catholic bishop in Maine claims the church is going to stay out of the marriage campaign there. Don't believe it. He's just opened a new chapter of Courage, the ex-gay ministry.
They're focusing where they should.
Oh, man.
Deal with your own members and leave us alone.
They are not going to stay out of it. But the worst is in Wisconsin, where a Republican senator has introduced a bill to tell the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board to treat non-marital parenthood as a contributing factor to child abuse and neglect. He wants
Is that going through?
I certainly hope not, but Wisconsin's a little crazy these days. And he wants the state to be able to take kids away from any household not run by straight married parents.
I think we'll send them to his house.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Ted Olson, the Republican lawyer who won us the Prop 8 case so far, is going to North Carolina to lobby against the constitutional amendment there proposed in the May 8th vote. The play version, the transcript reading of the play 8 about the Prop 8 trial.
Star-studded. George Clooney, Brad Pitt, you name them, they were in it.
In LA, and you can see the whole thing online. You can go to afer.org, AFER.org, and you can watch the whole star-studded play online. I have not.
Well, we're busy preparing for this program.
And it's been performed all over the country and at Emory University in Georgia, where it was a big hit. Right. The governor of Maryland signed the marriage bill there, although it's going to be up for a vote in November, probably. He said, "We are one Maryland." Marriage is winning in the Field poll in California, 59 to 34. That's a big leap in support.
It is.
Increases among Republicans and independents, young people and middle-aged, white, black, and Asian.
Who are they going to move on to hating?
I don't know. But a funny story, Outfront Colorado, an LGBT magazine in Colorado, gave a little history lesson. 1975, Boulder, Colorado clerk first to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples because a couple of couples showed up and said, we want a marriage license, and the law was gender neutral and didn't say they could. So she said, okay, I'll give you licenses. And the state attorney eventually declared them invalid, even though there wasn't any law against it. But people got so incensed, one guy showed up and said, here, I want to marry my horse. And the clerk said, your horse is only 8 years old. You can't marry your horse.
Now, you said there've been no same-sex weddings ever before that, but I'll bet Albert Nobbs or something like that back in the day.
The Catholic Church was performing, ceremonies of union for same-sex couples
in the Middle Ages.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Some international news.
Sure.
Well, the worst, the headline, and it's really horrible. It's happened before. The International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission is reporting that there have been close to 40 people in Iraq, gay people, kidnapped, brutally tortured, and murdered, and the Iraqi authorities have neither responded to the violence nor have publicly denounced it.
Terrible.
And they think it's being committed by the Mujahideen, or a group of the Shiite militia.
The St. Petersburg, Russia Parliament did pass the third reading of the no homo bill. The governor has 14 days to sign it or revise it.
Trying to get him not to.
Not looking good. Malaysian High Court has rejected a sexual independence gay arts festival because it would disrupt public order. Neo-Nazis brutally assaulted a gay man in Santiago, Chile, 24 years old, cut off part of an ear, carved swastikas on his abdomen, burned him with cigarettes, and beat him terribly. He's in a coma.
But in better news, the Prime Minister of Britain, a conservative, David Cameron, is standing up to the Catholic Archbishop of England or Britain, who calls gay marriage madness. But I should say that religions are not even allowed to perform same-sex weddings or civil partnerships. They're not allowed to do it. And I don't think that's right. If a church wants to do it, they should be able to do it.
The UN Human Rights Council this week heard testimony on anti-LGBT violence around the world, but also received a statement from an Islamic bloc of 57 nations objecting to the hearing and saying LGBT rights are not human rights, contrary to what Hillary Clinton said. And good news from Israel, where a court has acknowledged both lesbian mothers as mothers of a child. One contributed the egg to, inseminated by a sperm donor to her partner, who then gave birth. And the birth mother was originally acknowledged, but not the egg donor. The egg donor actually has more,
connection.
Biological connection. Thank you. But now they're both acknowledged. Right. In AIDS news, ACT UP has changed the date of its anniversary demo to give more time to organize. It will be Wednesday, April 25th in downtown Manhattan. Several targets keyed to the proposed financial transaction tax. Come to the organizing meetings. Monday nights, we're back at the center. Monday nights, 7 p.m. We're having good meetings, a lot of good work going on. Come to that.
Anna's a real ACT UP veteran. I was there for the first year, but I didn't have your staying power there.
Well, it's compelling stuff. It's interesting. A new study out of the University of Pennsylvania Medical School says 1/4 of those who are HIV positive in the U.S. do not stick with medications. Not entirely surprising, but not great news.
No. A little entertainment news.
Yeah.
Oh, first of all, the Gay and Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Expo. They're having the 19th annual one at the Javits Center here in New York, March 17th and 18th from noon to 6 p.m. each day then, so check that out.
And there's the new straight-friendly Out NYC Hotel and Entertainment Complex, which is opened up on West 42nd
Street. Oh, really? It's open. It's open. Why weren't we invited?
Glee did a very compelling finale for its current run of shows with Dave, the football player who finally came out attempting suicide and not, thank heavens. Calls to the Trevor Project tripled around this episode. The Trevor Project, great thing. Go to the trevorproject.org for information.
And I was told to be patient about Smash, the drama series about Broadway. Yes. So they have gay characters in it, but straight people are making out like crazy on that show, going at each other. And the gay people, gay guy finally got to go on a date.
Now they ended up in bed.
Wait a minute. So between scenes of heterosexuals going at each other, they show the homosexuals lying down in bed finished and not doing anything, and then talking about how bad the sex was. That's it. They didn't show them kissing, making love, any of that stuff. I'm sick of this stuff. I get really offended by that.
They were bare-chested.
Like the double, big deal.
Okay. The 3 white guys who call themselves 1 Million Moms at the American Family Association now want to boycott Toys R Us for carrying its Archie gay comic book wedding issue, but the issue sold out. And
at the New York Theater Workshop, 2 out gay actors are alternating, Dennis O'Hare and Stephen Spinella, in a thing called An Iliad, written by Dennis O'Hare, which is a poet recreating the Iliad story in a modern context. They're great. They're both great actors. I only saw Dennis do the role. It's a lot. It's an hour and 40 minutes is what it is.
And we're done, and we'll be back next week. Thank you, Chris Quinn, for coming in. We'll see you next week.
All right.